Welcome to Girls Who Gab with Habs and Muffy. I'm Muffy, and today we're diving into the unwritten rules of friendship. What you should do, what you absolutely shouldn't, and why knowing the difference just might save your sanity. And trust us, as women in our 50s, we've learned some of these lessons the hardest way possible. Stay tuned. Hi Habs, it's Muffy, talking about friendship today. What a great topic. In my 50s here, I have, I guess, been a friend for many decades and had friends over many decades. And I guess I have a few things to say about it. What one should or should not do with friends. I would say that it's been like an odd go for me from the get-go, given my mother, who set the pace when I was a kid that there are no friends. She said, there are no friends, there are only acquaintances out there, and I'm your only friend. And although I don't know if I really, I don't think I ever questioned that. I think I took that at face value that she was right, that in fact, she was my only friend and that everyone else was sort of acquaintances and sort of out to get me. Although I saw her having friends of all different sorts, really close ones who would really help her on a kind of a significant level, and other people she just like played bridge with regularly that she really enjoyed. Like, it seemed to me that she had a lot of friends, but in her mind, and I'm sure if you asked her today, there are no friends, which I don't think did me any favors throughout my childhood because I wanted friends. I wanted to be involved with groups of people. And also, I think children need to learn how to be a friend and how to have friends and how to make friends. And I was sort of on my own from the get-go with that. And so, I remember really awkwardly going up to this one girl, her name was T, in my neighborhood, and like asking her if she would like want to play with me, just like one-on-one. And of course, I think she thought I was a real loser, was like, no. Her parents were like the Barbie and Ken doll in this darling house, and she was so cute. And like, I think her parents were really about helping her make friends and like cool people. And I just wasn't that. I remember always fantasizing about wanting to be with T and playing. And like, there just wasn't any help for me to like make friendships or to talk about that. And then when I would go to school, like, yeah, I had some friends, little friends and stuff. And of course, your birthday party, we would invite the whole class. But my birthday was in the summer, so there was really no one around by the time it was my birthday. And unlike you, who's so good with your girls, who have summer birthdays, and you back it up to have a sleepover or some sort of birthday party before school ends, that just really wasn't the case for me. And so I would say that I had a pretty lonely um, elementary school and preschool, probably. Like, yeah, I had friends in the school, but then like outside of school, there really wasn't much happening. And I think for my mother, her mother was her best friend. That was her friend as an adult. And like all these other people in her life were not friends. So like a lot of it was spending time at my grandmother's house where there really was no one our age and the kids. But my mother got to be with her friend, her mother. Which is just something new that's coming to me right now. But like, there just wasn't a lot of hand holding with friendship. And also there was no belief that, you should have groups of friends. Like she was very anti-Girl Scouts. I mean, I did do ballet and tap, but it was just a class I took. So I would say that my early childhood was not populated with many friends. And I mean, I had friends at school, but I was a super sensitive kid. And so I think, it's not so good to be so sensitive when you're trying to have friendship. I mean, here's an example. Like when you're in third grade and someone mistakenly doesn't give you a Valentine, don't go tattletale on that person who didn't give it to you and cry, like make a big deal so that person isn't kind of punished or something. I mean, that's the sort of things I would do. I always wanted fair and just. If I gave everyone something, then I should also get something. And like, no one kind of said to me, hey, maybe talk to that friend directly. That hurts your feelings. Don't like go tattle it out to everybody. But I didn't know. No one helped me. I think it's very true and right that children need help navigating friendships and understanding what a friendship is, but it has to start on the bank that there are friends, that you can have friends. This sort of changed when I got older and moved to central Pennsylvania. It was just a small town. A lot of the kids that I went to school with were in my neighborhood, and they were friendly and they were like, let's be friends. This is somebody new. And it was like a fresh start for me. Although my sixth grade year, I was terribly bullied. I think I've mentioned this before, and like there was really no one to help me. No teacher even helped me. It was just sort of like it was a small little sixth grade Catholic school classroom. And basically that bullying and that ignoring took place on the playground during lunch. And I would just, be by myself and I know one was talking bad about me. And I was just alone. And that was pretty sad. I mean, most of the year, but we were involved with a different church. I wasn't Catholic. We went to a Lutheran church and there was a youth group. And I think I got involved with kids in the youth group there, but that was like, retreats and Sunday school and maybe like a youth night out during the weekdays, something like that. But it wasn't like my main, time at school with friends. I didn't get invited to any of the birthday parties or anything like that. But the funniest thing happened at the end of that school year, which was just that the head bully or whatever, the head of that popular group came up to me and said, "Oh, you suffered enough. We want you to be a part of us now." It's like, okay. I remember going home and telling my mother, like, "I'm gonna be a part of this group now." And she was like, "They're not your friends at all. I'm only your friend. How can you do that? Just kind of be on your own and suffer." And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna be with this group." And in fact, I was with that group and it was great. Yeah, they were awful people, but I was still like right? In with the cool kids and in and accepted and like seventh, eighth grade, that was my group. And I didn't have any more troubles. I would go to birthday parties and sleepovers and I had one-on-one friends. And I just, with that small town, almost like if you watch Stranger Things or Stand By Me, it was that type of like community of kids. And all sorts of weird things happen in that small town. I think I've mentioned a few of those before here. I mean, it was just like this crazy place. Um, but I was in, and that was my first experience in really having like a group of friends. And yeah, maybe that's wrong to sort of like just be like, I've been bullied for a whole year. Maybe you should say strong at the age of 12 and say, no, my mother's my only friend, and you're all just terrible acquaintances and bye. But I wasn't strong enough to do that at that point, and I just went with them. And then in high school, I did have a group of friends. We were sort of a disparate group that didn't really fit in with any of the really popular kids or really the nerdy kids. We were just kind of like good kids. Like, yeah, we were into boys and we were into like doing good in school and like being a part of certain, committees like yearbook or something like that. But we were all just like good kids. We didn't drink, we didn't smoke, we didn't do drugs. We were pretty lightweight about what we were doing. And that followed even when I moved high schools and moved back to Ohio. This other group of girls I got with were really smart, um, brainy kids, girls, because I was in all girl Catholic school at that point. And they were just, you know, super. I remember that group being super smart. Again, not drugs, not smoking, not drinking. All, into boys, a lot of them boyfriends, long-term boyfriends too, throughout high school. I was always sort of boy crazy, so I fit in, but like I was never a person who was going to do like drugs or alcohol or like put myself in compromising positions. I was not into that. But I was plenty busy with activities and like plays and I think cheerleading and dating and things like this. But I wasn't, I just was with a kind of that type of group. So we weren't like the most popular, but we had a group. It was solid and just good. It was a good 4 years, even between both schools. And I had a group of friends. Although I did notice with myself that I always kind of ping pong kind of back and forth with one particular person, not always in a group. So that's just interesting to note. But um and then of course there was college, and that I did rush the Greek system, but in the end I left that because it was just too much pressure to drink really, it was the drinking. I remember we were in that same sorority together, the one you stayed in. I did not stay in it because I remember my big sister that one night just saying to drink this whole bottle of wine in a minute. And I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. And she was like, you have to do it. You can't say no. And I was like, well, I gotta go. I just like walked out. And I actually remember you saying to me, like, if you don't stay in this sorority, people are going to talk really bad about you and you're going to have a really bad name. And I remember you saying that to me. I think you're trying to protect me. And I was like, well, then that's just how it's going to have to be. I just was not going to drink a bottle of wine. So I think in some ways, my mother's words of like, there's only acquaintances, I'm your only friend, kind of helped me in good stead sometimes of just being able to walk away if I need to. Like, they're not really like friends. But that kind of made it such that I had sort of an independent life in college, very much involved with my boyfriend that I used to take those Greyhound buses to all the time. And we had a group of friends there. It was more very much like we were almost married. We did date each other for 11 years, which is unusual, but we sort of had this kind of, very, I don't know, almost like early married kind of life, on the weekends with each other, and several couples we'd hang out with. And it was just like that was like my life in college. It really didn't have a lot to do with people on campus or partying or groups. I had a few people, but again, more like one-on-one, like you one-on-one with me, or that other one, LH, like one-on-one. There wasn't a lot of like group for me in college. And then, post-college, yeah, I've met people and had friends, all sorts of friends. But I do notice that with friendship, it's really not that group orientated. It really is one-on-one, which I think is very different from what I've observed of your experience, which is very much group, at least from college when I met you through our 20s and even to now. I mean, you do a lot of things with groups of people, um, which I never really experienced too much of. I remember having a boyfriend in DC, and like, man, when I like met him, he was like so into a group. Like, it was just incredible. Like, I was like, wow, like this guy has like all these people all the time. Like his challenge would be to find time to be on his own. And I just like relished that, like how it's always like calling up everybody and like getting together for dinner or for soccer or for like just running around or going to a movie. It was like 10 of them, right? And they're all together all the time. This is in like our late 20s, and maybe he was in his early 30s. All single, but it was just like that time, like, people did have that in DC. I mean, it was a young city, people were there. I mean, people did hang out a lot, but it was just so kinda new for me. I was, again, very much like one-on-one, one-on-one, and then, like, but very much, like, open to the world of people and just meeting all different types of people, engaging with everybody. So, like, my time didn't go with, like, establishing this group of friends and, like, hanging with them forever and ever and, like, just being with them and knowing them deeply. My life has been more about meeting people kinda almost randomly across the world, I would say, and then creating relationships that are sometimes pretty significant, actually, people who you can believe that you have significant because you don't know them that well. Um, but my life, I think, is really quite made up quite a lot of those types of relationships throughout my 20s, 30s, 40s, and even now as I moved to New York, I think it's the same kind of thing, um, where it's like I meet people and I connect and I have these relationships, but they're not necessarily like this group of friends I've had forever that know me really well or whatever. Just interesting to notice the energy of that. And it's funny, very recently, I went through this small photo album of like friends from, I don't know, college, and I think those DC days. I think it only really was just through the DC days. And they were, pictures that you took and developed, back in the day. And I'm looking at all these people and I'm thinking like, I don't know any of these people anymore, or I know them, but I'm not in touch with them. Or I was up until recently when I left Facebook, because I'm no longer on there. I knew some of them, but a lot of them are people that I no longer am friends with, and by choice. And so I was like, wow, I go, these people really don't, this is a whole like chapter. I think that's one of the most surprising things. One of the surprising things that I hear with my younger patients who are like, this is my best friend forever. And I remember thinking like these people in my 20s, whatever, my high school life, maybe even my early 30s, like I will be with these people forever. And like, in fact, no, I have very, very, very few people that I've been with over the years like that. You are one of the very few Habs, which is why one of the reasons you're a very significant relationship to me. But most have not weathered the years with me, which is interesting. Even not these groups, but just these individuals. So well, I don't know. I'm curious what you have to think about friendship. I'm definitely going to come back and talk about the how I'm not in those relationships anymore because I think there's a little kernel of, again, what not to do with people that I've learned over the years.
Muffy, I always say, or I often say, our topics are so interesting and fascinating. And it's true. I mean, I suppose that's because we can almost talk about anything and make it fascinating and interesting. But I think there's a serious side to this topic of friendship that, people don't often, I can't say they don't, but I'm generalizing, but it feels like people don't really really reflect and dig into what it means to be friends or to have friendships in your life. Maybe I'm wrong, but I often say it takes a long time to make a friend. I'm always very suspicious of the people that I become friends with very quickly. And I know deep down that it's a near impossibility that we're actually going to stay friends and build a friendship because I think friendship takes a long time to build and to grow and to trust and to maybe have hiccups once in a while. So, and I think that's where you find out if your friendship can actually last. I know you and I have had a couple of hiccups where we haven't talked to each other for maybe months or even a couple of years. But because our friendship has endured and we've gotten back together, sorry, there's a huge truck in the background, in this serious moment. But because we have endured those hiccups, our friendship is so very deep, so very knowing. I know I said to you once, um, that I see you. I've gotten to know who you really are through some of our really heavy conversations of things that both you and I have been going through in the past couple of years. And that's even more so today after you sharing a lot, and very significant amount about how friendship and friends were proposed to you at a very young age. And I'm going to be honest and say, no, your mother did you no favor as a child or even as an adult. And I know as friends, when you're friends, when you can be straight with someone while still delivering it in a kind and supportive way. Because friends need to hear stuff and they need to be able to speak their truths, again, in a nice and supportive and loving way. Now, sometimes there's not the moment to say something, but, generally speaking, I mean, that's what friends are for. There's a song to that. The fact that your mom said that there are no friends, that there are only acquaintances, and that she was your only friend, I mean, right there, to me, that's a huge alarm bell because mothers are not their children's friends. As much as you might have a friendly relationship, especially as they get older, that relationship changes less from mother to daughter and more of a friendship. I mean, not in every case, certainly not in my case. Um, but you're still not friends. It's still you're the mom and I'm the daughter and vice versa. I mean, not you. I'm just saying generally speaking. So, it's I think it's just it. Yes, you have made friends along the way and you've learned how to develop friends. But I think your mother really shaped how you made friends as a child and how you make them as an adult. because I heard you say, and I've heard this from you before, and again, there's no criticism, it's only an observation, but, everyone is out to get you, and so there are no friends. If that's what your mother told you. And I hear you say that from time to time. You feel that maybe somebody is out to get you. You can't trust them. They're not they're not being friends in your best interest or theirs. Well, maybe, but you know what I mean? And I think that really is rooted deep down into how your mother raised you to look at the word friendship. And the fact that you have made some long, enduring friendships like ours is a testament to you, Muffy. Not to your mom, but to you. I mean, to me, that's quite amazing. And that's difficult to rise above what you've been taught over and over and what was exemplified in many respects from your mother as that there are no friends. So I do think that has something to do with your building friends one-on-one versus a group situation. I could imagine that would be very uncomfortable for you. And you've had some experiences as an adult having a group friendship that hasn't necessarily always gone a great way. And so I can see where perhaps, and I'm not putting words into your mouth, you're not so trusting about that. And the one-on-one is something that you can control and manage a lot better. I don't know. I don't know what that is, but I just had to make those observations because it really hit me deep down inside. And in some ways, I will be honest, angers me about your mom telling you that there are no friends or only acquaintances, and selfishly that she is only your friend, your only friend. Because that is just, I don't know, in my opinion, I think it's the biggest disservice that a mother can do, and also lie, thinking that their daughter is going to be their best friend. Because, I don't know, it's just, yes, maybe we're best friends, but we're also mother and daughter, and that's the role, right? I had daughters, and they're my daughters. They're not my best friends. They're not my friends. And they will never be just my friends because I will always be their mother. So I don't mean to go off on that, but I had to respond. And as I always say, I hope you're not offended. And if anything, perhaps my comments give you other things to think about or insights. And this is something that we often do with our personal VMs. So I had to say that here. And I hope that's okay. I'm no model of making friends. I think growing up, my brother was almost 6 years older than me. And I lived on a street with a lot of kids. I mean, it was known in town as the street with a lot of kids. So, there was always somebody to play with, like before dinner, after dinner, on the weekends. And we just played all over the neighborhood. And my parents had friends. We didn't come from big families. Neither A or I have come from big families. And so, my parents would often invite their friends over for holiday dinners, like somebody else who didn't either have family nearby or just didn't have a big family. And they were very welcoming that way. They socialized quite a bit, not necessarily with everybody on the street, but more so like handpicked friends. I don't know if my father had a really good friend or not, which is interesting to reflect on. My mom had some good friends, both from college and when we were younger. I mean, a lot through the church that they went to, also neighbors. She's always been very generous and gracious with our neighbors and visitors. I mean, I always say that she hasn't taught me a lot, but I guess in some sense, she did teach me, and this is interesting to think about now and to say out loud, that she did teach me the value of friendship and the importance of it, which is ironic because I have gone on to make really good friends. I wouldn't say tons of friends. I mean, some people have a lot more, But at some good, solid, long-term friendships, like you, like my other girlfriend group from DC, and K. Yeah, a lot of my girlfriends seem to have their first name starts with an A. Um, and a few other people, um, either from college or other parts of my life. I wouldn't say I've made a ton of new friends as, a early 50s person, but I have made some friends, a couple, a handful or less. People that I really call friends. I mean, and I think that's interesting to think about, like the definition of a friend. For me, I think that's something where I can be totally myself. And what do I mean by that? Like, I can totally act as ridiculous as I want to, as free as I want to be. I can be just really ditzy, or I could be really smart, or it's just I can say and do anything around my friends, and they give me that freedom to do so. I don't mean in the sense of hurting anyone or being particularly or like targeting like to be mean towards someone else or something, but just I can be my full self in all the ridiculousness that I am. And I say that in the nicest of ways to myself because I'm often ridiculous. I think we all have to recognize there's some ridiculousness in all of our behaviors, or in all of us. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm going down a slippery slope there, but I think that's, for me, like a good friend is somebody I can just really be myself in all the most ridiculous ways. Growing up, I remember one friend I had on our street. Um, and she and I used to fight like cats and dogs. Like we were mean to each other. Like we would scratch each other's eyes out. We would like pinch each other, but we were still friends at the end of the day. Now, even as an adult, that's happened to me. My very good friend A and I, we have fought several times. One time we fought in a bar. Now, granted, I think we both had drinking, drunk, um, uh, several cocktails. Let's just put it that way. But we were in the middle of the dance floor, shoving each other and pulling each other's hair. I can't even remember. But the bouncers, like, seriously didn't know what to do. And then we went home because we lived together and we were still friends. Like, just, again, that's someone you can really be friends with. You can duke it out with your friend. Because, at the end of the fight, you'll stand side by side and be their friend and be there to support and hold you up. So, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with the fact that you became friends with the group that bullied you because, everyone needs friends. I don't think there's a should there. And I don't think it's wrong. You know, maybe they wanted to see how tough they were. Maybe they were trying to, how animals mark their territory. Maybe as kids, they were trying to like protect themselves and, in a very subconscious way, test you out. And then realize at the end of the day, you took it and then some. And they were like, hey, this is someone I admire and I want to be friends with. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe they were awful kids, but like I said, everybody needs a friend. I mean, you think about kids that go with maybe the wrong groups of people and stuff, they're just seeking friendship. So I think it's an interesting concept, especially, as I see my girls evolve from elementary to middle and high school. Man, that's a tough age. I remember I had this small friendship group in high school, kind of like yours. It was like a little bit of a disparate group. We weren't like the geeks, we weren't the super popular. We were just kind of there, mostly do-gooders, relatively intelligent. I'm not trying to put us down. I wouldn't say we were like the brainiacs of the world, but all smart people. And we were going from 8th grade into high school, and this one friend A, again, I seem to have a lot of friends that start with the letter A. Now I'm just realizing this, but this A person, she became friends with a sophomore, like super close, super buddy. And she just like she just pulled away from our group and pulled away from being friends with us, and it was kind of hurtful. But sadly, I mean, by the time that other friend, who was a year older than her, graduated from high school, I remember seeing her our senior year, and A had no friends because she had put all eggs in one basket. And now it wasn't a bad basket, but there is like, I don't know, I think you have different sorts of friends to feel to 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 feed certain needs that you have as a person. In other words, I don't believe one person can fill another's every single living need. I mean, my husband and partner in life is my best friend, but I have other best friends that fill very different needs, like you, like A, like M, and, I could count a couple more. And perhaps there are friends in your life that only fill a niche for a certain part of your life. I don't know. It's interesting to explore this concept of friendship and what it means to each individual and how people really think about the concept of being a friend to somebody else. What does it mean to them? How do they value that friendship? And how do they give back or not? Lots of interesting questions, Muffy. But I think one true thing is that true friends grow together. You sent me a card recently that says that, and I think that's very true. True friends grow together. Maybe that's the meaning of the ultimate friendship.
Hey, Habs, it's Muffy. Thanks so much for your thoughts on my mother's core tenet about friendship. One thing about her, she was definitely my mother. She was not my friend, and she used to say that too during my childhood. I'm your mother, I'm not your friend. But I think alongside that, throughout my childhood, it was like there are only acquaintances, there aren't any friends. As I got older, I'm gonna be your only friend. I'm your mother, you can trust me. And of course, I think I was kind of being quote unquote trained or quote unquote groomed to think of her as that as a young adult and into adulthood. I remember talking about my friend BC, and, she very carefully said to me, and this is very recent days when I was early 50s, oh, she's a nice lady, be careful. Right? Like there was always a sense of like, and be suspicious of those around you. I'm your friend and I'm telling you that. So I was very clear that my mother was my mother as a child, but also to be suspicious of of friends, that they're only acquaintances, there are no friends. I think later on, as I got older, it was like, and I'm your friend. I'm the friend you can turn to. And it always kind of bothered me a little bit, because especially I have gotten no contact with my family. I mean, and that was getting close to the no contact decision. That really bothered me. Like, she's a nice lady. It's like, no, BC's my friend. Regardless of what you think of her as a nice lady, like, she's your daughter's friend. So just to say, I think it was actually very, very harmful. Um, One of the reasons, I mean, there's just so many reasons why I have gotten no contact with my parents, and by extension, my family of origin. But, that it just doesn't make any sense. It's a part of an abusive pattern that was sold to me, to keep me with her and not with anyone else who may introduce an idea that that's just not right. And, coming up against that, I think there was a lot of fear within her that I would hear something different and maybe um, leave. And it wasn't that I heard something different, like you're saying on this podcast. It was that I experienced difference. And it just wasn't. It was just a part of an abusive pattern. It really wasn't for my sake. It was more for her own. And I don't know where she came to think, everyone's out to kind of get you. Um, yes, I do say that No one's out there for me. And I think that that is, I don't feel protected. And I think when people don't feel protected, it's because their parents did not protect them. And I certainly was not protected by my parents. Um, I remember being a small child, or not small, middle school, 6th grade. So the same grade as Jay is in right now, and coming home and saying, this is that terrible year where I was being bullied, and the head bully was like, I'm going to beat you up at the bus stop tomorrow morning. And this is, 1980, oh God, 2. So a whole different era of parenting, I have to say. And her being so, so scared and like coming back to my parents and saying, can you drive me to school? And they were just like, no, you need to go learn how to fight your own battles. And like no one helped me. I remember being very stressed out in my bed that night, worried what was I going to do? What was I going to do? I had no way out. I mean, ultimately, a situation like that does sort of build your own character. It does make you have to face whatever you're afraid of and overcome it or take the hit or whatever, but come through the other side on one's own. And I guess it does give strength to a kid. But I think also there are times when children, especially with friends, need to be protected. And I was not attuned to. And I did go off to the bus stop. And I'll never forget, this person comes up and they're like, JB were her initials. And she was like, are you ready to be hit in the face or to be punched in the face? And I'm like, I am. And she was like, she went to punch me and I grabbed her hand before it could ever reach my face. And I just took it and I shoved it back on her and I said, never do that again. Ever. And she never did do that again. She never threatened it again. It never happened again. So nothing happened to me except I stood up for myself and fought her. And like, had my parents maybe taken me to school or talked to the principal or something or the teacher, I would probably been seen even more as a as a wuss or a pussy. But like, maybe that's one of the reasons why they came up later on in the year and said, hey, let's be friends. You've got some balls, kid. Um, because I had that within me somewhere. I was surprised I did. Um, but yeah, I got through it. But I don't know if that's the best way to get through a situation like that. But I was really kind of left to my own devices to figure things out, except when I decided to be friends. And it was like, wait, you only have acquaintances. And these people have been like enemies. Why are you doing that? Right. That's when I get questioned. So yeah, friendships for me has been sometimes very difficult. It seemed like you have a high tolerance for people. You fight, you get in and you fight and you don't mind the fight. And like, it's a strength and a testament to enduring friendship. And then get through it on these friendships that really are important and it strengthens the friendship. For me, I don't have a lot of fight in me. I mean, I'll just say that. I don't have a lot of fight. Like, I think as a kid, I was told, you're an angry fighter. I really am not that at all, actually. It's interesting how things get named over one. And it's not actually true of one's character, but you sort of are carrying that. Um, I actually think of myself, and only you could say, Habs, because you've been with me for a long time as a friend, a very generous, kind, thoughtful, um, person in friendship. I really hold the other person in mind a lot. No matter how much I've got going on in my life, I always have, and I extend myself in so many ways. Um, and I sort of expect that people will meet me there, and people don't often. And that's just the truth. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a capacity issue. I don't know if they just are really a friend of me. I don't know what it actually is. And I've taken, like, this is one of those do's and don'ts that we've talked about. Like, when people have disappointed me when I'm much younger, I have, well, like a really close friend who I really wanted to like see change so that we could continue our friendship. Like, I was very honest, but she never heard it. And she just kept doing the same stuff, just not holding me in mind, even though we're supposed to be close childhood friends who maintained a 30-year friendship. Like, just, and eventually I was just like, wait, this person can't be there with me the way I need and what I'm giving to her. It's not mutual reciprocal. And so I ended up leaving that relationship. And as soon as I left, I mean, God, she took I mean, I didn't know any of her friends, but we had somehow become friends on Facebook. And she just had all of them gang up on me. This person called my mother saying, "Can you make her get back with me?" I mean, all this stuff. And I was just like, wait a second, right? Like, I've tried to tell you, and you don't care. And many months later, this friend wrote me a letter and said, you don't, or wrote me a card and said, you don't need to respond. And I didn't. But she said, I'm sorry. I think I've been in a major depression or something. And I don't know. But it's amazing the backlash when you try to be honest with somebody and they can't hold it or be there. Um, and I've had this happen many, many times where people just like, I try and tell somebody like why, I cannot be a friend anymore with them and like try and respect. I don't just ghost. I used to not ghost. I'm like, I have to sit down and tell them. And like how they would just backlash and like take all the other mutual friends and those mutual friends would just go and never like ask like how I was feeling or what I needed. Nothing. Just be like, yep, she's on the right. She was hurt. How dare Muffy do that to our friend? And we're with her. And like how people take sides and can't seem to hold in mind another person. And I was sharing that with you and you were just like, yeah, there's just some things you just can't do. Is like telling somebody why you can't be friends and that you're not going to be friends is one of them was it just like goes haywire. So I'm curious, Habs. I mean, sounds like you've had a lot of fighting with your friends that make it stronger. I mean, how does that happen for you? How do you stay in and strengthen through fighting?
Hey, Muffy, thanks for the clarification about your mom. That you were very clear as a child that she was your mom, not your friend. And then more as, you became an adult, she really wanted you as a friend. Um, and that she couldn't, she always taught you not to trust people. I think that probably has something to do with her upbringing on the farm and just being alone with the grandmother. It doesn't sound like she had many friends growing up. I'd be curious about that, but yeah, I'm sure you know all this. So, and yeah, I thought it was really interesting about how your mom was you know, kind of jealous of BC, and saying that she wasn't your friend, be careful, but she really was your friend. Uh, I think my mom has often felt like that as that, when I became an adult. My friends are my family. I say that often. And because I don't have a big family. And I didn't really have anyone to lean on from that respect. I mean, yeah, I think my mom was very jealous. Like when I lived down in DC and I would stay there for Easter and all of my friends would get together and there'd be like a big dinner and I think she was quite jealous of that I think she probably felt in some way that I was replacing them, but it really wasn't that. It was just that I could trust my friends, and I felt, you talk about being protected. I felt protected by my friends. And I also learned a lot from my friends. I learned a lot from you. I mean, I remember those days of sitting in your apartment and talking about sex and all that kind of stuff that I won't get into too deeply right now, but you taught me more than my mom ever did. My mom taught me nothing. She wouldn't even talk about like me having a period. I mean, it was just awful from that respect. So, yeah, I don't know where I got the strength and the ability to be a fighter. I mean, I think I've just always been scrappy and I've always had not clear, but I've always known what I want for myself, right? And I don't know where that comes from. I grew up in a house where my mom tried to control everything, and I probably resisted that in a lot of ways, and that, as a result, that's why, I had anorexia very young. Um, and, I going to college was really freeing for me because I just left the home and I could make my own decisions and live my own life. And I mean, I think my mom saw that in me. She sometimes resisted it and tried to control me even more, even as like a college student and post-college student. I remember my mother was having a party and she did not want me to go. I mean, and it was a huge full out fight. I think I was post college or very close to it. I definitely could drink. So I was definitely 21. And I mean, on retrospect, she later, many years later, apologized for not letting me go to that party. So I don't know. There was a power struggle there. And I just like resisted my mom. And I think that was probably tough for her in some respects, because she could control me for much of my life. Um, so yeah, I think I've just always been scrappy. And maybe that has to do with like me being born with all these congenital defects and this follicle that I had. It's essentially for our listeners, it's where your gut, your insides are on the outside, and there's nothing keeping them inside. So, like, the doctors had to repair my stomach and whatever. I'd been fine for the most part. I won't go down that road. But, I think I just always kind of, I don't know. I've just had that fight in me. And I think my friends, like I said, my friends are my family and they're important to me. And I just, I spent a large part of my childhood kind of being in the background, kind of being that quiet, shy person, but I really wasn't. And there's a lot of games that are played in school, and I just, you know, as an adult, I was like, I never want to go back to high school. I don't want to play games. And so I think it's important to me to stick with my friends, like the people I really feel are my friends, like you, like my DC group, a couple of other people in my life, and because they're my family. I don't know, it's. I do have to say that the story about your sixth grade bully incident. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes kids do need protection. And when they don't get it, they're always, seeking it. And I think that is kind of one of the reasons you always feel like, you're not being protected, or not always, but I'm just saying, like, you have this sense of like feeling or not feeling protected. And then it's really rooted in a lot of your childhood memories. And I think I get that. I just wanted to say that I completely understand it. I think in some respects, no, maybe you're not a fighter, but you also showed you had balls, right? And you stick to your convictions. So it might be a different type of fighter, but you have strength within you, Muffy, to stand up for yourself and, you know what your parameters are. So good for you for telling that girl, that the bully, that she would never try and hit you again. Did you ever see that movie? It's called 3 O'Clock High. My husband A loves that movie. It's about this kid who's kind of, I don't want to say meek and not necessarily shy, but not in the popular group in high school. And this like kid, this bully comes, is transferred to his school. And the bully, like, somehow a rumor gets out that the bully wants to fight this kid, this meek kid, after school. So, like, all day long, he's looking at the clock, and how he ends up defending himself. Anyway, it's a silly movie, but maybe rooted in some reality for all of us as kids that have maybe had to like stand up and fight for ourselves. I think kids have it easier and harder in some ways today, um, instead of, us Gen Xers. A lot of parents will go and fight for their kids, but I think also sometimes kids need to take on the fight. Now, I'm not saying that what your parents did was right. I disagree. There is like a level of protection that's needed. And, we just didn't have it back then. And especially in your case, you definitely did not have that. I would say that my parents, I think they tried to protect me from that standpoint. Um, I don't know. They didn't do very well with my brother, who got teased quite a bit and beaten up. And so I think maybe they made up for it with me a little bit. I'm not sure. I mean, my family, we definitely fought. I mean, we fought. We yelled, we screamed, we not kicked, but it wasn't physical. But, I grew up in this German kind of high-tempered family. My mom, being from New England, very stubborn. So, yeah, I don't know. I would have to say my father, now he had a temper. He definitely had a temper. Otherwise, he was a very gentle, non-confronting individual. So just, it's interesting how your childhood kind of shapes a little bit how you are as an adult with friends. My parents had a fair amount of friends, and I think they modeled that for me. Perhaps they regret that now, or at least when they were alive, but in some ways, I can attribute my shepherding of my friends to them to some degree. And yeah, I'm willing to fight for the friends that I know are my friends, and they're meant to be my friends. And I think they become your friends because you do go through kind of the thick and thin, like the highs and the lows together. And that's what makes it your friendship stronger. Because we all fail at some point, and I think it's just really about how you pick yourself up, admit to your mistakes, and also forgive others for their mistakes. Because that's life, and we're people. We make mistakes. But I think it's those who learn through that process are the ones that are going to fight and fight for their friendships. As your card that you recently sent me, true friends grow together. I think that's so very true, Muffy.
Hey, Habs. It's Muffy with just a last minute. I find it so interesting that our mothers sort of had a jealous bent toward us and our would-be friends. Like, they were older than us, right? They had friendships and they could see us and maybe what was coming for us. And, well, it doesn't sound like your mother kind of warned you off of anything, but like when it came to seeing you have close friends, like the jealousy kicked in. For my mother, I think she had insight about what a friend could be for me and started warning me that, you cannot trust people out there. There are only acquaintances. To that end, though, my mother had many, many friends in high school, in college, in her bridge groups, in her antiques group, in her foodie groups, with my father in his college. My father had a best friend. So she had many, many friends. But between her and me, she'd always just say they're acquaintances. I have no friends. So she always stood by that for herself, even though she was always modeling to me having lots of friends. So what's a girl to do? What sort of sense could I make? And I guess it just says our mothers actually set a course for how we will be a friend and how we will have friends.
Friendship isn't always easy, but it's always worth it for the right friend, in my opinion. In this podcast, we've explored the kind of friendship we witnessed growing up, whether it was modeled for us with love and loyalty, or left for us to piece together on our own. We've unpacked what friendship really means to us, not just shared laughs or inside jokes, but the quiet moments of support, the hard conversations, and the unwavering belief in each other. Unlike family, true friendship is chosen, nurtured, and sometimes fiercely protected. It's the glue in our stories, the mirror to our growth, and often the lifeline in our most vulnerable seasons. Thanks for listening to Girls Who Gab with Habs and Muffy, and here's to the friends who feel like home. Follow us on Instagram at Girls Who Gab with Habs and Muffy, and stay tuned, because next week we're talking about choosing to become a mother. Or maybe not.